I guess it depends. And people hate that answer. But if I'm working in AI and I'm very much focused on solving a problem that's relevant to digital content syndication or to e-commerce or to optimizing sort of things that are relevant to the digital AI focus in Vancouver, and you want to take advantage of that, then I think that's great. But if you're working in an area of AI where we don't really have strength, then there's really no reason to come here. But I guess one thing that I would like to say is, we're in sort of in the middle of COVID, and I can say in terms of our experience and our background, we're actively working on therapeutics, and we're not, a new drug that treats the symptoms of COVID once you have it. That's still years away, but a vaccine, multiple vaccines are a lot closer. But the fact of the matter is COVID will end, and whether it's in 12 months or in 24 months, there's going to be lasting social repercussions, but it does change. It does get better. And I do think that, eventually we will see not a return to what it was like completely like pre-COVID, but the fact is that location does still matter. And within the short term, you can do deals, you can go public, you can get, funding rounds without ever having met a person, which is completely unprecedented. But I think, specifically for people in Grenoble, you want to look at the area of technology, and then you want to find your match in British Columbia, and then create that linkage. It's less about, being location specific versus sort of creating that graph between what it is that you're looking for, what you do, and finding other companies that you can work with. So if you're in the area of, carbon sequestration or whatever, then maybe you go talk to Carbon Engineering. Or if you're looking at, fusion, then maybe you go talk to General Fusion. If you're looking quantum computing, you can talk to D-Wave or One Qubit or various other companies that are out there that are doing these things. So I think, it's looking at specifically who you want to partner with, and if it makes sense, then definitely, creating that relationship and that linkage. And people like Shivam, people like the Trade Commissioner Service, in Paris, in various other places where you want to, create these relationships. They can all help and create those linkages. And also, if it's AI, then you can contact me, and I'd be happy to link you up. We have about 150, 160 companies that we track. The number grows and also sometimes decreases because these companies do get acquired, or sometimes they disappear. But we have a very rich ecosystem, and there are facilitators that you can reach out to. And I'm sure, Catriona on the clean tech side, and various other, industry sort of avatars can help people navigate the local waters.
Thank you for that handle. You mentioned investors. Stacey, you and I had talked about that, and I touched on it in the beginning when I had said that it's interesting that in BC, we didn't see a significant dip because we have such a strong global investor base that participates in the ecosystems here. And as has been mentioned several times now, you went public during all of this. So when you look at the next 12 to 24 months, and you commented in particular on how it is that investors in BC responded here, perhaps differently from elsewhere, but as you and I talked about, it bears mentioning, because even if it's something that seems self-evident, that of course that's how investors would behave here, I think it bears mentioning because it shows what are the values here, what are the and for those who are of like minds, who might want to partner here and find a fertile ground here. So can you talk a bit about the investments and how it is that you see that evolving in the next 12 to 24 months?
Sure, thanks, Laura. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the most beautiful things that I witnessed coming through COVID this last little while was really, that we had a very collective response, I found, in a lot of ways. There was a lot of just appreciation and empathy, for other people's situations, guiding a lot of decisions that I saw here. And I mean, I can't comment to what it was like elsewhere, but I know that I had probably a dozen different folks that I know that are individual investors, in like the early weeks following initial COVID, specifically, they speaking to me about various aspects of what they were going through. Saying, I'm going out of my way to actually find companies whose financing rounds are being jeopardized, or who are, had investors pull out, or were really in dire circumstances and in danger of either losing a round or having to go through layoffs or actually shut down. And these investors were basically consciously going out and making sure that where there were good solid companies, that they were deploying their capital in a way that was going to really enable these companies to continue making great impact, and very much so thinking about it from a macro perspective. So that was just very heartening for me. I really appreciated that level of just consciousness being brought into the workplace, and really understanding the ripple effects of some of these short-term economic impacts, and the things that everyone can do from their individual seats to generate better responsivity and a greater sort of rebound coming out of these times. So that was sort of one lens. But I can also comment on the fact that from my national perspective, I've probably had, it's been a couple hundred over the last 6 months, just inbound inquiries around Canadian companies and Canadian deal flow and how to better access, Canadian opportunities. So I've really noticed an uptick on international investor interest into Canadian companies since COVID, which, I think partially could be enabled by a lot of what, has already been discussed here today in terms of the increasing trend towards digitization and the ability to, do deals in a way relying entirely on platforms like this to get things done versus in person and locality based investment. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, I think there's also just this really big interest in Canadian companies who are or companies here who are working on these social things that I mentioned. And this is obviously my bias because that's what Numinous is doing. And I think that we're trying to solve mental health and addiction issues, which obviously is a very major global area of interest right now because of COVID. So there's been a lot of international investment, looking to find progressive companies who are making headway on solving some of these macro societal issues and the human aspects of what COVID is creating, and the other economic impacts and the social impacts of this that are going to be playing out for years to come. So for those entrepreneurs that are thinking about that and trying to get ahead of some of those problems, there's ample opportunity and there's ample interest. And I'm really actually noticing that going in quite a positive direction. So maybe I'll leave it there.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you, Stacey. You talked, and so Katrina and I, I'm going to segue to you on this one and your views on the next 12 to 24 months. We've talked a little bit about investors and investment opportunities. We can talk, you and I were talking about partnership opportunities and how it is that Foresight facilitates a lot of that. And I'm thinking of the SDG Connect partnership opportunity that you talked about. Can you elaborate on that more? Because I think it really illustrates how it is that international companies can partner with BC-based companies, even in times of COVID, and participate in a meaningful way in what's going on in BC and grow themselves and grow BC as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura. And I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned, clean tech as an enabler across different sectors to support, environmental harm and things like that. And quite interesting because, the key sectors that we think about here at Foresight is built environment, transportation, energy, natural resources, which includes forestry and mining, also water and agriculture and food. And when we think of those sectors and the technologies that can be applied, whether it's AI to support, management or efficiency, or whether it's, different types of energy or water recovery, whatever it might be, the opportunity is quite interesting, but also lends itself to a lot of stakeholders in the ecosystem looking for technologies, or else looking for solutions, or else looking to partner with other people. And so what's quite interesting is there's a couple of projects upcoming that I think would be quite interesting for this group to learn about. One we have is called the SDG Connect. So it's the Sustainable Development Goals Connect, where we are looking, to work with international corporates and European corporations who are looking for Canadian technology and innovation. And we're happy to make that matchmake around specific challenges they may have, whether it's around waste recovery or, GHG reduction and things like that. And we're happy to make those introductions to solution providers here in BC with those corporations. That's one project we have. And off the back of about 2 or 3 weeks ago, as part of the New York Climate Week, which is a UN initiative, we had a week-long series of webinars focused on specific subsectors in clean tech. One was focused on hydrogen, one was focused on power management. We had another focused on circular economy, and a few other sessions as well that was high level and policy orientated. And what came out of that was, it was basically a networking session to learn about, well, we have these solutions and we have these needs. Well, we're actually going to follow up with more of a matchmaking session in February, and we're working with Canadian partners now to kind of get that set up and get it going. We're going to be working a lot with the European consulates and the international clean tech network as well, including Tenerife, to make sure that people who have the solutions are be able to understand what's happening in BC and get connected to the right people. So that's another partnership opportunity. I have a third one. I have a lot. I can talk about this. There's for those who are interested in forest bioeconomy, so make an agriculture bioeconomy. We will have an event on December 3rd. It's part of the World Circular Economy Forum online. And what we're doing is we're bringing together corporations who are looking for, say, for example, alternative packaging solutions that are not made from plastic. Who are looking for maybe automotive solutions that are made out of bioproduct mold. So, for example, from waste from the forestry process or from the agricultural process that can be condensed into products and through different types of chemical processes. So, very interesting. This is a growing area because we're seeing that corporations, as part of their CSR and environmental strategies, are looking for products that have a low carbon advantage and that can support their needs when they're looking to procure as well. So quite interesting events coming up as well in regards to that. I'm happy to share links around afterwards and keep everybody updated.
Thank you for that, Katriona. Yes, I think that there's as you touched on, there's ample opportunities for partnerships, and I think that the links certainly would be appreciated. Jim, I'm gonna turn to you because people kept coming back to you as being the touchstone, so we're gonna bring it back to you to kind of wrap a bow around all of this, because Vancouver, well, I think from your vantage point, you have the pleasure of having both the micro view and the macro view of what's going on in BC and in Vancouver. We talked about, we talked about policy. We talked also about we touched on this a little bit, Katriona touched on it as well, is the government climate here. We happen to be between elections here, between governments, as they call it, the interregnum, which is a fascinating term. But the general climate in BC, regardless of which government, is that it tends to be oriented towards the sectors that have been an area of focus today. Shivam, you and I also talked about diversity and inclusion, and as much as BC has a long way to go in that respect, it is on a path. Can you touch on all of those things? Can you talk about when it comes to diversity and inclusion? You talk about the involvement of the investors coming in, and the political climate here in terms of stability and how it is that the approach to facilitating economic development.
So let me just bring this all together, and I'll try my best to do so because there's a lot of topics. But I think just touching on what Katriona, Tracy, and Handel have mentioned, I think so. Looking at first the investment side of things now, both from if you're an investor that is wanting to invest in the local economy, or if you're an organization wanting to set up in the local economy, I think there's some key stats that I can share that can sort of help shed a little bit of light. So the direct investment in Vancouver has grown about 38% over the last 10 years, year after year. So that's a testimony to, again, Vancouver being a solid, stable economy when it comes to a knowledge-based, IP-based economy. One key thing to notice is the fact that in Vancouver, companies tend to exit within 5-year mark. So right from when they inception to when they sort of exit is about 5 years, which is notably higher than other ecosystems, not just in Canada, but globally. And that again translates to having a very strong IP base. And now that is fostered a lot by having a very stable political government incentive-based structure that fosters growth and innovation. So in terms of government supporting innovation, Canada and BC have some of the most strongest incentives to promote R&D within the area. As an example, approximately for every dollar that an organization invests in R&D locally, they can expect up to 37% back as incentives. And this is, straight coming from the federal order and cascades down to the provincial to again promote growth and investment locally. And so that creates the stable political environment, government-backed incentives, combined with a strong knowledge IP-based sector, creates this very sort of interesting dynamic to promote growth and investment, right? So that's on the investment side. Now, on the diversity and inclusion side, BC is the most ethnically diverse province in Canada, and Metro Vancouver is the most ethnically diverse city within BC. So we're doing well, but that's not to say we have had struggles, particularly in the tech sector. We haven't done a very good job of ensuring gender parity when it comes to pay, or even ensuring that racialized minorities have an equal footing when it comes to representation in the tech sector. So that has been a challenge that has been recognized in the last many years, and there's active work that's being done to mitigate it. One of the initiatives is an initiative by the provincial government that was started a couple of years ago to really look at the tech sector as a whole, and come up with recommendations and sort of free resources that organizations could leverage to improve their own diversity and inclusion initiatives. And that focuses exclusively on racialized minorities, increasing their representation and mitigating the pay gap, and same for women as well. One key factor here in all of this is Indigenous rights, which is a very key central piece to this entire conversation. And that is an ongoing conversation. I personally can't say that we have done a very good job, but certainly there is a mindset that acknowledges there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And how can we ensure, as a society, as a province, as a city, as an economy, that we at least put Native or Indigenous rights and mindsets as a centerpiece to this conversation, so that they can have a representation in this growing economy, in this growing city. That's certainly a work in progress. It will take many years for the reconciliation to happen, but a lot of fantastic people are putting in a lot of fantastic work towards this. So I'm sure we will have positive outcomes in the near future.
Yes.